mic on your side.
We got him, yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, well, so the title of this panel is The New Distribution Landscape. So what does that mean? Basically, we're just going to be talking about how today you can get your shorts seen by the largest audience possible. So like I said, each of our panelists have a clip to present. So Paloma, let's start with you. So maybe you could just quickly introduce yourself. Everyone already knows your name, but just for posterity, and then we'll go into your clip.
Hi, everyone. I'm Paloma Martinez, and the clip you're going to see is from a short that was released as part of the New York Times OpDoc series in late August, early September, I believe. I think it was late August. And it's called Sanctuary City Hotline. I won't say that much, but it's kind of an exploration of these activists in San Francisco who try to help immigrants who believe they might be raided by ICE or that ICE is in their community. But it's a little bit of an unorthodox approach about how to see their work and the sort of what was happening in San Francisco at the time and how people were feeling.
Okay, let's roll the tape. Thanks so much. Chloe, could you maybe, sorry, do you have the mic? Yeah. Could you maybe quickly introduce yourself and explain to us the clip that we're about to see?
Yeah, sure thing. Great clip, Paloma. Hi, I'm Chloe Gbai. I'm the POV Shorts and Streaming producer. I work for American Documentary, which is a media arts not-for-profit that, in addition to producing several television shows for PBS, we also have a whole interactive branch, a community engagement branch, but we're here to talk about shorts. We have a new show called POV Shorts, which is a broadcast initiative for short documentaries, and it's part of the PBS Indies lineup, which supports independent filmmakers on PBS. So we can roll the clip and you can kind of see some of the projects that PBS Indies has put out into the world this year.
Okay, and last but not least, we have Sarah.
Hi there. Can you hear me? Sarah Lash with the Conde Nast Entertainment. I oversee acquisitions for Conde Nast digital networks, and that includes our video distribution platforms for Vogue, Glamour, Wired, Vanity Fair, The New Yorker, GQ, Bon Appetit, among up to 21 others. And the clip that we're showing today is from a documentary we acquired earlier this year called Knife Skills.
Okay, so as you've seen, we have a really diverse array of work represented here. I'm also really excited because on this panel, we have people that can speak to kind of both sides of the equation. So we have a filmmaker and we have two distributors and people doing acquisitions. So I guess, for my first question, I'm just gonna keep it kind of broad, and this would kind of go to Sarah and Chloe. What is the sort of work that you're looking for when you're doing acquisitions?
So for me, I'm looking for, first of all, really high quality work, and that can take many shapes and sizes, and sometimes the film that's gonna excite me the most is something that I've never seen before. So I try to go into a festival or a market or a meeting with a filmmaker with a very open mind, just sort of ready to be surprised and impressed. And then, actually a very close second and, on a practical basis, as important, a film needs, for us to want to buy a film, a film needs to line up well with one of our brands. Sometimes it is unfortunately the case that I might see a film that does really impress me, that I think is really high quality, but there just isn't an outlet for it within our network. Or sometimes, what we're looking for one year might be a little bit different from one year to the next. But so quality and creative voice, and then also alignment with one of our brands. And sometimes it's not always obvious, and we have some brands where we're going to be able to tackle a broader range of subjects. Some of our brands might be a little bit more focused, such as Bon Appetit or Wired. The New Yorker can address, a range of topics, but I know sort of what feels like a New Yorker type of film when I see it. But I would say those those broad qualities are what we're after when we're looking to buy a film.
So POV Shorts is a brand new initiative. We just started it this year. We're actually in the middle of rolling out our first season throughout the month of November. And much like the long-form POV series, we look for films that speak to contemporary issues and give the American public a different point of view and a different perspective. And our show is designed kind of, I think, uniquely in that it's broadcast and digital. So we produce half hours. Ideally, it's a compilation, so ideally it's 2 or more films per half hour, which gives opportunity for shorter shorts that are 10 minutes, 12 minutes, whatnot. But we will do 1 half hour that's a standalone film, Earthrise, which is in Doc NYC this year, is our one episode this year that we did as a standalone. And but when the films are packaged, they're packaged thematically together, and we take on a whole host of topics. I tell everybody, if you're going to pitch me, we look at everything. We just don't do kind of like historical biopics. That's the only thing. But it's interesting because we're distributed throughout the PBS system. So we not only work with PBS stations for broadcast, we also are available on the PBS app on OTT devices, so those your Rokus, your Apple TVs, whatnot, and then we're also available online. So we break out our short films out of the broadcast package, and then we distribute them as standalone shorts online. So we don't take a lot. We had about 500 submissions in our first year, and we took 8 films. And I watched them all. So we don't take a lot. We're very selective, just like the larger POV brand. But I think what we do is we really stand behind every project. So we have our POV Engage, which is our community engagement arm. And every film that's shown in the POV family goes into the POV engagement library. We have a partnership of over 1,100 community partners that can sign up to host screenings. For select shorts, we make engagement materials and discussion guides to really extend the life of the film past the broadcast and make sure that it can be used in communities. Why do you make the film if you don't want it to be seen and used? So we really believe that every film that we take, we also want to be able to use it in that way and have it spark discussions in America locally. So, and then we stand behind our shorts not only through our POV Engage, but we also support them throughout their festival run, their possible awards run, and we really kind of the reason we take so little is because we want to be able to do more with the films that we take, so yeah.
And between Conde Nast and POV, we have an interesting kind of contrast, so to speak, in terms of business model. And I was just wondering if the two of you could each discuss kind of the underlying business model for the work that you're doing and how that does or doesn't inform the work that you're looking for.
So American Documentary, I work for a media arts not-for-profit, and a large focus of the work we do is not only, it's twofold. We're here for both the American public in that we're here for PBS, we love public broadcasting, but we're also here to serve the industry, and we understand POV has been around for going on 32 years, and we feel like we serve 2 populations, and one of them is filmmakers. So when this initiative was being crafted, we really looked at it as a benefit to stations in the PBS system, because they like half hours, they want to be able to broadcast shorts, and they want the content, but also to filmmakers because we were looking at the landscape of short form filmmaking, and we wanted to see it be more sustainable. We wanted shorts to have more value for filmmakers and on their resume. So we developed our licenses to reflect that. We look for broadcast exclusives. We don't want it to be playing on another channel, but we're non-exclusive across the board. So you can still totally play with Sarah. You can play with Kathleen Lingard Opdocs. You can go to The Guardian and talk to Charlie Phillips if you want. You can still get a wide online audience and broadcast with us and still have that dual support, because we found that that's what filmmakers really need for their short form content. And then we also pay, I think, above value, very heavy license fees. And that's kind of, we look at, I just didn't really want, when I was developing this program, to be exploitative with my rights. We look for 4-year license contracts. So those are the terms. And yeah, I'm a filmmaker too, so I wanted to make a deal that sounded attractive and fair to me as well. So yeah.
So at Conde Nast, our business model is ad-supported streaming, also known as AVOD. So that means we keep the lights on with pre-roll advertising primarily, and then also through sponsorships in terms of direct monetization of actual videos. You know, other things that we do at the company include, you know, sponsorships of, you know, maybe a video series. We do branded content, but for the purposes of this this actual question from Sam, we monetize video through pre-roll advertising and the occasional sponsorship. So how that informs my acquisition strategy, as you might reasonably deduce, we might be attracted to a particular short film or video by, you know, wagering, oh, hey, this is going to get a lot of views. And, you know, that's a very natural reason for me to want to buy a film. You know, an example of a film that I bought earlier this year out of Hot Docs that felt to me like a natural fit for organic, potentially going viral organically, was a film called I Love Your Fucking Name. We bought it for our digital native brand, Iris, and in a few months, it has already garnered 850,000 views on YouTube. I think, no question, it's going to hit 1 million before the end of the year. And that's, you know, after doing this for a while, I can see, like, you know, certain video is going to have a reasonable chance at generating organic views. Another factor that's going to motivate me to buy a particular film, two films that are playing here at Doc NYC would fit this bill. Grace, which is directed by a filmmaker who's in the audience here today, Rachel, and that's a film that it's actually the first film I ever bought for self, and it's a beautiful film about a breast cancer survivor who experiences empowerment through choosing to get a tattoo, and it's a very beautiful, positive story that I think rounded out the programming lineup at Self really nicely. You know, there's definitely a place for stories of body positivity there, and you know, add to that, it's doing really well and has over 100,000 views on Facebook. So that's an opportunity to tick two boxes at once. And then also we have. On Iris, we released a film called Tightly Wound, which is a really unique story. It's a unique format, actually. It's a documentary memoir that's also animated. So, you know, again, that cues back to what I was saying before about, you know, being open to surprise. I haven't seen a film like that before. I think the filmmaker Shelby Haddon did a great job, and I think that's an instance of, you know, a film that's making a really great addition to our lineup editorially in terms of, you know, really speaking well to what the brand is about. You know, someone who is sharing a very personal story, talking openly about a sexual and physiological condition that is not spoken about very often, and there's been a really great conversation around it, a lot of engagement, and, you know, very active comment section on YouTube, and we love to see that. It's a great sort of way to help build a community and subscriber base. So that's not strictly about views, it's about building the editorial voice and creating subscriber loyalty and engagement.
My next question is for Paloma. So to kind of flip this question onto you, because Sarah and Chloe are obviously dealing on the distribution end. You're more on the creation end of things. And I was just wondering, you know, at what point in the process as a filmmaker are you thinking about distribution? Is this something that you're already thinking about before you start rolling camera, or is it something that you start to think about once you kind of have a completed project? And then I guess the other question that I would add to that is, are you generally working with financiers before you start rolling, or are you looking for licensing down the road to kind of help you across the finish line?
All right. Well, I think it really depends on the project, but I'll use Sanctuary City as an example. So I didn't start thinking about where was a good fit for the piece probably until it was probably about halfway through making the piece, where I had gotten of access to this phone material, where I was able to comb through it and understand really concretely what my vision was and what I wanted to say and what the language of the film was. So I didn't go into it thinking, well, this is going to be for New York Times Op Docs, right? That's just not. It all had to start with a really solid idea, right? Me wanting to do it, and then as I was making it, and I had a rough radio cut, because that was just the process for this particular piece. It started to dawn on me a little bit, and I was very familiar because I had been making short content for a few years about what the landscape was, and it felt like it could be something that could be on New York Times Op Docs. It sort of hit those sweet spots of, it's kind of newsy, but it's a deeper dive into something that people know about, but maybe they don't see it this particular way, and that's kind of what they tend to take. But they're a very varied platform, right? They take all sorts of things, and they really like you to push style. But I didn't think, okay, I'm making this for Op Docs, because that wasn't the case. Like, I'm an independent maker. I was really focused on the story, really focused on the style. And then this particular piece, they acquired it in a longer format. It was like a few minutes longer, and the way they tend to work is that they acquire, you go through a round, and I sent it to them in a very in a very done stage, where it didn't really require much of a pitch, because it was there, right? Like, here, just watch it and see if it's a good fit. I actually think it would be, and they ended up taking it. So for that particular piece, it came in through about like halfway through the process. I really do think that as a short maker, it's all about the idea. I think if you're passionate about the idea, finding, right, like an outlet afterwards that fits your idea is the best way to go. Not thinking, oh, I want to make something for New York Times Op Docs, or I want to make something for The Guardian. It just doesn't work that way. It has to be very personal. And this was an incredibly personal project for me. And I didn't know if anybody was going to take it. And it's kind of a good example of very DIY, very cheap production that has helped, me a lot, and it's been pretty well seen, but it didn't really take a lot of it was not resource heavy at all. So now I still work the same way. I have, 3-4 things that I'm working on, and I maybe think, okay, this could be a good fit, but it really has to stay native to what the story is, right? I think if you try to think, well, I'm going to try to make something for a particular outlet, I mean, some filmmakers work that way, but I don't. Yeah, I'm just going to, make it native to what I think the idea is.
I think it can be a bit of a chicken and egg situation for a lot of filmmakers, though, because in order to simply start rolling on a particular project, filmmakers generally need some sort of financing to actually get that process started. So I was just wondering if anyone has advice for someone who has a great idea for a short, but one that would require financing, and one that they're not necessarily able to put together a rough cut and then bring at a later stage to a distributor.
I just want to say, second, Paloma, I always tell people, don't make anything for me because it won't be good. Make the film you need to make, and then if it's not a fit for POV, I'll suggest places. That being said, money is really hard. There's a couple of different ways. The models that I've seen is chicken and egg, in that, you pitch to whether it be like Field Division or Topic Studios or what have you, and then they will fund and help you kind of bring the project to fruition. There's also other ways to get your short funded, especially within the public media system. ITVS funding has an open call, and you can apply for shorts. They also have, POV doesn't do episodic docu-series content, but you can do that through ITVS Digital Storycast, Digital Open Call, which goes to their Indie Lens Storycast. Southern Documentary Fund will fund documentary projects in the South, and they'll fund shorts.
Doc Society just opened one.
Doc Society does it. Sundance has one specifically for short documentaries. Tribeca has documentary funding. We just got off of an If Then panel for short docs. So there are places within the industry. Chicken and Egg, yeah, that's a good one. I don't know about Women Make Movies. But yeah, so there's ways of doing it.
And here at Conde Nast, we're actually, because we had such positive experiences with films like Knife Skills and Joe's Violin, produced by Doc NYC's own Raphael Noy-Hazen. But we're thinking that, it would make sense for us to, on a very, very selective basis, get involved earlier. So I am interested in taking pitches, but the big, big caveat there is the bar is much higher in terms of there being a very clear thematic connection with one of our brands. It's really a very different story for me to look at a completed film and say, hey, the way the story shook out, over the course of this story revealing itself to the filmmakers, I can see how this would line up well with GQ or The New Yorker, one of our or Vanity Fair, one of our brands that has a bit of a broader lens. But if I'm gonna champion something that's at the pitch stage or the pre-production stage, there really needs to be a very vivid straight line to one of our brands. I have to be able to say, okay, this is going to come out to be a film that belongs explicitly at Vogue or explicitly at Wired or Bon Appetit. So, so on the one hand, I do want to see pitches for projects earlier, but on the other hand, I need to have a very clear argument for why it would be considered and really line up well for a particular brand.
Are there any completed projects that came as pitches to you that you're able to speak to right now, or is it still early in the process?
It's still early in the process. I'm trying to think if there's one project right now that I'm championing for GQ that I'm extremely excited about, and I'll try to describe it really broadly, so it will protect everyone's confidentiality obligations at this stage in the game. It's a project that is about race and politics in fashion, and it's really smart and really provocative and perfect for GQ. And that's an example of, I might get like 1,000 pitches for GQ, and I'll be like, no, not even close, not even close. And then it's like, that's the one. Okay, it was worth looking at all the other 999 because this particular project lines up as I couldn't have dreamed up a better match, frankly. And this is why we want to hear from external producers and hear about the projects that they're working on. So hopefully I've given enough information that it's an informative example, but it's way too early to, we're still sort of going back with notes on the pitch and, probably still a little ways off from negotiating on it. But I'm bullish that something like that's gonna go further, so.
I want to revise what I said earlier in that I don't think that you should make a film for an outlet, but you should have so don't make a film for where you want to go, but have an idea of where your film could go. Absolutely, from the get. I was talking to a filmmaker actually yesterday, and he was telling me that he wants to make this doc. I won't share the idea, but he wants to make this doc, and he was like, yeah, I'm thinking Netflix might be the place. And I was like, why not go to Bon Appetit? It's a food doc. Like, that's a better, don't think about like where you want to go, but think about what is inherent to your project, and you might find a better fit, and you might get more support and reach your target audience in a better way.
So this question is for all three of you. It strikes me that everyone kind of has different metrics for how they define a successful film, a successful short. And I was just wondering, for the three of you, is it plays, is it awards, is it money, or is it a combination of the three? And kind of how do you measure the success of the work that you're creating or releasing? And what are some examples of some work that, some releases that you thought were particularly successful, and maybe what do they share in common?
Well, I will, again, talk about Sanctuary City. So this might be a little unorthodox because obviously everybody wants to make a sustainable career from shorts, like if that's what you make, right? And I mean, for me, particularly right now, it's not everything I do. even though it is primarily what I do. You know, you got to couple together a career from many different parts, many different types of filmmaking. But for this particular short, success was having an impact for the group of people that I collaborated with, specifically the San Francisco Rapid Response Hotline, that got an incredible response when this premiered in New York Times. They also got a lot more hate calls from Mississippi. But hearing from them about the impact it had for their work was incredible, that I think this was more impactful than, festivals are wonderful, but having it there immediately, hadn't even done a festival run when it was premiered because it was timely. So I just decided, you know what, it's gonna cut its wings in the festival circuit, but it doesn't really matter, right? It's more impactful for them to have it out there now. And that's been incredible. The response that they've received, the stories that I hear from all the volunteers, it's helped them gain legitimacy in the city, which helps their work. And so that's really, really important. And obviously, everybody wants to get your work seen, and that's really great. And even though, right, I mean, I know we're gonna talk more about the economics of the short form maybe later, but in terms of just, launching you as a maker, as somebody who, who's legitimate in the industry. I mean, shorts, people really watch them. They really watch them. It's your calling card. If you're somebody who is thinking of doing this and all you can make is a short, like, it really can go very far. And for me, it's been really extraordinary, the feedback that I've received from just this one piece, even though I've been making shorts in the festival circuit. But when something like this premieres, like, you hear from a lot of people, right, who want to know what your next idea is, and that's been really, really great, just getting views. Yeah.
We leave it up to the filmmaker. Every single time I buy a short, we bring the filmmaker in for a meeting, or we have a call, and I say, what do you want to do with it? We have, of the 8 films that we picked up this year, we have kind of the full gamut. We have a film called Public Money, which is about participatory budgeting, that we premiered online, never touched a festival really. And the filmmakers were like, no, we just really want it to get out here. It's been sitting in our drive and it hasn't really gotten any traction, and is PBS interested in it? And then actually from it being on our platform, it got picked up on The Atlantic. So it's getting a wider audience, which is great. And it was really relevant in this last election in the midterms. And then we have a film like Earthrise, that wanted a long festival run. We're doing a large awards push for it. Internally, I care about views, same as Sarah. I think it's a good indicator of audience. So we're not monetizing it, but I want the clicks, and I care about carriage in the system. I care about if PBS stations are picking it up and broadcasting it and loving it, and I consider that a measure of success. And we're POV. We have 38 Emmys or something like that. So we also very much care about awards. But I think for shorts, we'll pick up something if it doesn't have a strong festival run. We'll help it do that. I think we're really flexible, and we just want great content, which is cliche to say, but it's kind of true.
So for us, views are a very important metric for success, and we're a digital distribution company. So over time, we're getting really good at it. We have great following on social media, and using our social media platforms and pushing to our followers there. It's a really great way to trigger views, and other sort of quote-unquote softer measures of success would be awards. We love getting nominations and awards. Knife Skills was an Academy Award nominee for the short doc category the year before. We had Joe's Violin also in the short doc category this year. Actually, I don't know how I forgot this. We commissioned a short film for Glamour called Angelique that was nominated for an Emmy, and that's a really nice story of a pitch that I got very organically. I met a woman at, I think it was IFP's Film Week, a young filmmaker who was working on her first feature doc called Exit Music. It was about palliative care. And I said, wow, this your footage looks really impressive. This is a case where there's no alignment with any of our brands, but I'm really impressed with you as a filmmaker. I mean it when I say keep in touch. Let me know if you ever have any projects upcoming that you think would lend themselves to short form. She pitched me on this project about a teen girl in North Carolina who was dealt a very tough hand because her father abandoned the family, and the focus of the film was, a teen living with a parent with severe mental illness, and how she was trying to overcome these hardships. And it's just a very intimate, beautifully told story, and we released that on Glamour, and it's done well. But we were particularly another reason that makes us happy to get behind a film is absolutely we want to build talent relationships. It's not a doc in this particular case, but there was a film I bought out of Sundance a couple years ago called 5 Films About Technology, directed by Peter Huang. And I loved that film. And when it came time for me to think about filmmakers to hire for a commission, a branded commission that we were doing for The New Yorker and Qualcomm, I thought of Peter immediately because it was sort of technology-related stories, and it was really great to know that I had a guy on, who I could text easily, who I knew was talented and professional. He ended up doing a great job. So, that made me all the gladder that I bought that film that I liked, knew would be great for The New Yorker in the first place. Always looking to build talent relationships. That's something that I find increasingly useful. So.
And as a follow-up question for Sarah and Chloe, are there any particular trends that you've been able to suss out from the shorts that have been most successful on your platform, be it topics that people are particularly interested in, be it runtime affecting the performance of, anything structural or thematic that you're able to observe that the audience is particularly gravitated towards?
It's still early for us because we just released the first batch of POV shorts online on October 1st, so our metrics are kind of still, I'm giving it some time to kind of see the full picture, but and it's a small sample size, but POV has always done shorts. We always had short content. We're just doing kind of a bigger push for them. And so I know for, we have StoryCores, which is a partnership with StoryCore where we do a full suite of distributing their animated documentaries. So they take their StoryCore stories. Yeah, they're great. And then they animate them, and it's beautiful, and they're the perfect pocket of emotion in 3 minutes. We have we know kind of when those are succeeding, but they're all very similar in style, so there's no differentiation. But I will say, I think a lot to do with the short doc distribution, especially in a digital landscape, is timing and SEO. That's going to be 95% of the thing. So we saw an uptick. For instance, we partnered with Field Division in distributing A Night at the Garden by Marshall Curry, which follows, for those of you who haven't seen it, it's an archival film which looks at an incident in American history, which was the largest gathering of Nazi sympathizers, which was in Madison Square Garden, 22,000 people. And we saw a huge uptick around the horrible massacre in Pittsburgh in that video of people looking to understand the history of white supremacy in this country, especially against Jewish people. So I think that plays into it a lot, and we don't take things that are too long. We pretty much cap it at 25 minutes, but I think a lot of it has to do with topic and rapid response and what the internet is looking for that day. Yeah.
In terms of trends, I would say that we're seeing average view times steadily tick up. When I first started at Conde Nast 4.5 years ago, I would be looked at as if I had 3 heads. If I proposed a film, over 10 minutes. Now the inverse is true. Really looking for, I would say very agnostic on running time, but generally a little bit, tuning in a little bit more to films over 10 minutes. And then I think, again, I can't emphasize enough in terms of, as long as there's a thematic connection to one of our brands, I really keep an open mind. I would say I'm almost more interested in, submissions that I've never seen the likes of which before. That aside, I would say that I see a real response to to films that offer an intimate, personal perspective, whether it's the filmmaker sharing a story themselves, as is the case with Tightly Wound, or this story in Knife Skills. I think the fact that the sort of protagonist, so to speak, was the restaurant manager who was he sets up this restaurant to address recidivism rates in Cleveland and provide employment for recently released convicts. And I think it adds a lot to the experience of watching this film that he's a convict himself, and he can speak with a lot of compassion and empathy. Or in the case of Grace, you have a woman who's opening up her home, showing her body. That these stories that are very open and intimate, or even on the far lighter end of the spectrum. I Love Your Fucking Name. These are people talking about their experiences with their names, and I think this personal. This access to inner lives of people. I think these films that have a very humanizing perspective. I see a common denominator there.
I'm curious, Sarah, if I may. Where I do see differences is between our audience that watches on OTT platforms versus through like an online portal. And I find that, for instance, like our StoryCorps, our 3-minute shorts aren't being watched as much through like the Rokus and the Apple TVs as traditional TV as they would online. And I'm noticing there are different audiences, and I'm wondering if you see length differences on the different platforms.
We're watching that, but not yet. I mean, I think we're reasonably anticipating that average view times are going to tick up further still in the living room, simply because our viewers are not going to have their hand on a mouse, and they're not going to be tempted by the YouTube right rail recommendation engine. I think just certain ergonomic interface factors will invariably have an effect, but we don't have that data yet. That's just me riffing from the gut, but I think it's very reasonable to anticipate longer view times in the living room.
I also anticipate it as being a symptom of like cutting the cord and people just like moving to streaming only, and
I want to go back to something that you touched upon, Chloe, which is this idea of like topicality and how that affects the release of a film, because I find that there's kind of a very fine line oftentimes between quote unquote like documentary and news. So the sort of thing that New York Times would be churning out on a daily basis that is covering yesterday's news oftentimes lives alongside a short film that maybe took a year to create. And as you mentioned, trends will often dictate which shorts are really sought after on the market. And I don't really have a very clearly formed question here, but I'm just wondering, because there's often this tension between filmmakers who have spent all this time working on a film and are now in the midst of their festival run, and maybe the theme of their film becomes highly topical, and they're now faced with this choice. Okay, do I rush to release this on a public platform, or do I keep it off of the public platform to preserve its eligibility for festivals and the like? And I just wonder if you have any thoughts on that, and Paloma as well. What are your experiences dealing with topical subject matter and how best to handle the release of films that touch on topical things?
I think it depends. It depends on the project. It depends on, is it going to be a topic that is recurring? Like, I think anti-Semitism is recurring in American history, and especially in the national conversation. Unfortunately, I think it's going to be a topic that comes up again. So that's an example. But I also think that, for me, the most interesting thing happening in the shorts landscape now is exactly what you're speaking to, wherein short docs are being used as accompaniment for news pieces and journalism pieces. And I actually think that there is New York Times is a great example in that, there's New York Times video and then there's New York Times op docs. And one of them is like an independent, documentary showcase, and another one is like that whole pivot to video kind of thing that's happening. And I think, the shorts landscape's really interesting in that way, and how it's being used for both rapid response distribution for online publications, also for branded content. Square released one of the shorts in this festival this year is a piece that was funded by Square because they're doing an independent documentary series on economic opportunities, basically on like stories about small business owners, that kind of thing. And you know, where's the line on that? Where's the line on like branded content commercials and also on like, you know, a maker making a story for a brand? And so I think when it comes to distribution and timing, if you're trying to work on the level of festivals and like an Oscars push and all that kind of stuff, there's an art to it. But if you're also working on audience, there's an art to that too online, and you kind of have to make that decision as a filmmaker. I've seen very few films that have been able to do both.
So, I mean, I can speak to sort of a dream scenario for a maker, in which I'm happy to report I feel like there's a much more intentional effort now on behalf of distributors and makers to say, okay, let's have a conversation about what the rollout is for this short. And I've had that experience where now, you know, you really think, okay, when are we going to put this online in order to have the best possible festival run, right? In order to have the best chance for awards. And I've seen that more and more every year, and that's really good. That's exactly what you want. That's exactly the conversation you want to have when a distributor takes your work. And now with Sanctuary City, though, we had not done a festival run at all before we put it online, and I knew that was a sort of a risk, which is okay. I think that was the first time with my films that I said, okay, I'm going to do that, and I'm glad that I did. But it is absolutely going to have an effect in the festival. But that's sort of the dream scenario of having that very very, very, very concerted effort of strategy, right? That's great.
Also, like, a festival audience is small, you know, in comparison, and it's very targeted. It's a lot of times it's non-diverse, and it depends on the audience you want for your film. It's funny, a filmmaker just told me the other day, we like know this, but it's nice to hear filmmakers say it, that after every rebroadcast of their film, they get an uptick in their social. So I think of that too, especially working on TV, the opportunities that broadcast can give you to just tap into a different audience. So I think when you're thinking about distribution, you know, think about online, think about festivals as a type of distribution and a way to get your film out there, but also think about these other avenues that you can reach your target audience or the widest possible audience.
I think it's a tricky proposition to try to game the news cycle, and I think generally you want to avoid rushing. I think it's one thing to say, hey, you know, we released a film on Vanity Fair called it was about the AIDS crisis and how Reagan blew it so decisively, and we very decisively released that on World AIDS Day, December 1st, and it did really well. And then, you know, on an unanticipated basis, you know, from time to time, you know, if a politician makes a public gaffe referring to a politician's handling of AIDS, in particular Reagan, as unfortunately Hillary Clinton did about 2 years ago, give or take, we got a real spike in the film's views. But I think, you know, if your film is topical and important, I think you're going to be better off, you know, just having a strategy, you know, and doing it thoughtfully and thinking about firing on as many cylinders as you can. And I think increasingly established festivals like Sundance, like South by Southwest, like Doc NYC, they're gonna care less about online exposure, and they're gonna care more about, you know, curating a quality lineup, and I see that's only going in one direction. So I think when you're thinking about distribution versus festival play, I think less and less that's a mutually exclusive, you know, they're less mutually exclusive propositions, and I think that's a very filmmaker-friendly decision on behalf of festivals, and I think it's great that it's going in that direction.
I mean, you've all sort of individually touched upon it, but yeah, I think the elephant in the room off the most utility that you derive from them.
Well, for me, so I've had shorts do both things where they were purely online first, or they were just in the festival circuit before they garnered traction and got distribution. It just really depends on the film. So another short that I did called Crisanto Street garnered a lot of traction in the festival circuit, and it'll probably get distributed, but it took, it had a long life in the festival circuit, like a year-long life, and it just played better to those audiences. I think I see it a lot as, I don't know, tell me if I'm wrong, but I mean, you guys use the festival circuit as like your pre-screener, right? I mean, that's what you're looking, yeah. So it's been incredibly beneficial to have a festival run, because people see it, the people who are obviously programming see it, and then they're looking for your next thing. Yeah, so I mean, I still love the festival circuit. I think it's still like, it is like, it goes hand in hand, I think, with digital platforms.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. We like to look at what's going on at festivals. We have an open call. It's free and open, and it's rolling submissions. And every film that goes to our open call gets seen by at least 2 people. So it's not that we won't accept anything if it's not on a festival run, but it's true that if something's like gone through a festival, we know it. It's actually funny though, because it's not necessarily just the Sundances and the Tribecas and the Doc NYCs. I actually saw Crisanto Street at the Brooklyn Film Festival this year. So, we're also looking at local regional festivals and also things outside of the coast. We're in the process of reorganizing what festivals we go to. Black Star is a great festival to look at content, especially by makers of color. So,
and actually, yeah, that's a really good point that you make, because the festivals, sometimes it's been surprising. Like, I've gotten more response from playing at Palm Springs or at Brooklyn or New York Latino Film Festival than I did when I played Hot Docs, for example. Yeah, it's surprising. So I think finding those passionate audiences, obviously, like I got a great response from Camden, because those audiences are fantastic. So even if you're a maker and you're thinking, oh my God, I didn't get into Sundance, that nobody does, you really do get a great response from those passionate audiences, and you just don't know who's in that audience.
Yeah, so as is the case with these guys, the festival circuit's crucial to my doing my job efficiently, and I'm very grateful for all the festival programmers around the world. And the list of festivals where we track the whole lineup, and I mean reach out to every film that doesn't seem experimental, like literally every short film that's in the English language and is not experimental. I think the list is 25 and maybe even closer to 30. I mean, we're looking at a lot of regional film festivals, and I think that's only expanding. I think maybe when I started it was something like 15, and then you see, certain film festivals like Camden, like what's one in Montana, Big Sky, these film festivals that, through the hard work of their producers and programmers are really building a name for themselves, and I think it helps if they have a niche like documentary, or in the just to use a different example, Nantucket, they focus on screenwriting. I think it does help to have a niche focus, or Palm Springs Short Fest, or Aspen Short Fest, True Falls, yeah. So I think there's really a place for these niche focus festivals, in terms of, so that's more the practical side. It helps me do my job, because otherwise I'd feel like I'm boiling the ocean. In terms of how much we care, I mean, I don't know how much we care. I think not as much as we thought we would. I think, at the outset of when we got into distributing shorts, we would say, oh, Sundance Grand Jury winner. And that probably helped a little bit, like maybe, an incremental 5%, but I think it's more what the film is about and how much it invites the audience in. I think that's far more important any day of the week. I don't know, a non-industry audience just doesn't seem to track that with much significance.
No, yeah, I completely agree. I've passed on films that have won the jury award at festivals and have Oscar qualified. I've still been like, no, because it just wasn't, either it wasn't a fit for the brand, or it just wasn't, it just wasn't a fit for the brand, to be really honest. And so it happens.
I will third that point and say that my team, we regularly serve on festival juries, and we regularly pass on the same films that we awarded at film festivals for Vimeo staff picks. So, I mean, just because a film is a great festival short and plays really well in the festival context doesn't necessarily mean it will play online. It's still a great film, but it might not be the right fit for Vimeo staff picks or for Conde Nast or POV. I think we're about to get the 10-minute warning here, so I just want to make sure that members of the audience have an opportunity to ask any questions they might have. It looks like we already have one over there, so I'll open it up to the gentleman sitting over there.
What are the biggest mistakes and most common mistakes you get when people pitch you?
Biggest mistakes.
Did everyone hear that?
I would say one fatal flaw that I strongly recommend filmmakers against if you're interested in digital distribution. Maybe you're not. Long opening credits. Please don't. No, stop that yesterday. So yeah, that's a way to lose. You know, people. You need to invite people in like the first 7 seconds. And you're doing the opposite of that with long opening credits. Title, cut to the action.
When people pitch me fiction, we don't do narrative shorts, and for some reason, people really like pitching us narrative projects. That's probably the most egregious one I've ever seen.
Happy to know I haven't made either of those mistakes. That makes me very happy.
Are there any other questions in the audience? Yes, right here.
I would say we clock it, but it's not gonna tip the scales. Like if we like your film anyway, and you have a meaningful social media footprint, I think we might be more. I think we like to be collaborative anyway. We try to be, but I think we might be like if we see that you're really savvy on social media, we'll say, hey, you're part of the team. Let's work on this together.
We care. It depends on where we get involved in the project. If we're kind of the first, if we get in before your festival premiere or whatever, and you don't have a large social following, our communications team will work with you to build that. Same thing with our community engagement arm. They'll work to create kind of community out of our partners, to create partners to bring on board. We like filmmakers to be able to come to the table with a little bit of something, but if they don't have it, we can work to make it. But that being said, if it's if you've already been distributed on a bunch of different platforms, if it's kind of at the end of its life cycle and it's coming to us and we're looking at it and it doesn't have a large social following, I'm going to pay attention to that. I'm going to wonder why. And if it has all this distribution, it hasn't picked up the social love, because like I said, everything on the internet, in my opinion, is 95% SEO and social and marketing. So I think it's important to think about as a filmmaker, and yeah.
And Paloma, how important is social media to you and your strategy?
Oh man, I think I'm definitely deficient in that area. No, not in terms of distributing right now. Yeah, I don't know. It's not really that big part. A big part. I mean, it's great to work with. When the New York Times thing came out, I definitely was being helpful in my own way, but I think they had it covered on their end. Yeah.
Yes, right here.
Thank you all for being here. Chloe, if someone wanted to get in touch with you every 6 to 12 months, twice a year, are you approachable? Are you reachable? Just to pitch something?
I feel like this is oddly specific. Yes. Yes, I'm totally available. The best way, honestly, to do it is to do it through my open call. So it's cfe.pov.org, call for entries, cfe.pov.org. That's the best way to pitch us your project. And you can send, we're acquisitions only, we don't fund anything. So I pretty much won't make a move on anything until it's at the rough cut stage. But if you send us, you can send us early things and we can track it. As far as me personally, I can give you my card. I'm totally accessible, but you can imagine my inbox is pretty crowded. So for project-specific support, the best way to do it is to do it through the open call. If you just send me a link to your project, my intern will just put it into the open call. So you save us you save us 2 emails and a little bit of work.
And would a trailer help you in terms of a pitch if you don't have time to talk on the phone and you want to see like 15 seconds?
Oh, absolutely. And even especially with the trailer, again, I won't probably say yes to anything, but I can absolutely tell you if it's not a fit. If I can see something, I can be like, this is not for us, I'm sorry. But like, I always try to recommend somebody that you can go to after me, so I can try to find a home. Yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah, I think we have one right there.
Yeah, can you speak to the economics of it, as filmmakers were often financing our own films, and I think we're all curious how much you pay for.
Was that just to me? Or our acquisition fees are $300 to $500 per minute. That's for both broadcast and digital. And the higher end is for brand new stuff that would be premiering with us, or we would be a part of its kind of festival.
I think that's pretty open, I think. Depends. Yeah. Low, like $2,000, $3,000, just depends. Yeah. And they just, streaming rights. Yeah.
Unfortunately, since we're a privately owned company, I can't disclose that. But I will tell you that every deal is different. Chloe has a fairly you have essentially a rate card, and for us, it's going to depend on a string of variables. Which brand is it? How are we, what are the other deal terms? It's all moving parts. It's not like, oh, we pay between X and Y. It's much more nuanced than that. Are we getting just North America? Are we getting worldwide rights? Do we think it's going to be an awards contender? It would not be meaningful for me to just check out a number, even if it weren't confidential.
That's a really good point, too, because we don't do worldwide rights. Like, the rights that we ask for are so in our own little kind of like category that's why it's so set, my rates, because I'm just like, I know exactly what I ask for each time, and we kind of don't deviate from that, but that's a good point.
Yeah, we do sometimes, right now, I think just to add a little color to what I just said about territory, we're actually only distributing or rather monetizing directly in US and Canada. That being said, if a filmmaker is planning for a very North American-centric release and doesn't really have much in the way or isn't pursuing much in the way of territorial distribution, I will encourage them to give us, typically I think in terms of economics, the US would be 35% of the overall worldwide gross of a film. But I know that in the case of If I Was God, it's higher than that. But the U.S. views got a significant lift from the other territorial views. So if there's a view bonus, you're going to be better off giving us worldwide rights, even on a non-exclusive basis in the rest of the world.
Well, I'm going to be the cheapskate on the panel and say that we don't offer any licensing fees for Vimeo staff picks, but we also don't take any rights either. So it's all just a handshake agreement, and filmmakers who release their work on Vimeo retain all rights and are able to remove them from the site as they please. Do we have any other final questions? Oh, we do. Okay.
I'm reluctant to, only because it's so early. Like I said, we just did it October. We just released them online October 1st, and I just don't, especially with the way the show's designed, we look for unlimited broadcasts. So the idea is that stations can use them and use them and use them and use them throughout the license term. So to have a real picture of success as I envision it, it's a multi-year view. And I mean, I think so far we've been pretty good. I'm really proud of all of the films and the carriage that we've gotten through the stations. We've played in major markets on both coasts. We've hit a good population of America. But I don't think it's reflective of what the full success could or would or will look like. So it's a little bit hard. That being said, one of the changes we have is the first year we released POV shorts. For those of you who know the PBS system, it's a little bit complicated, but we released it through a soft feed, which meant there was no national air date. It was a pilot program, so it was really up to stations to opt into the content. So the fact that we did get major stations to opt in was, I think, pretty successful. And then next year we'll be moving, it's the first time I said this publicly, next year we'll be moving onto the NPS, so we'll have a national air date across all PBS stations. So so I think we'll see even more growth with next season, which I'm starting to program right now. So I'm sorry, I just don't really have it.
We're about to run out of time, but I just thought a nice place to end this would be if each of you could just give one super quick, concise piece of advice to filmmakers who are trying to reach the largest audience possible.
Just story, story, story. I think if your idea is incredibly solid, there is an audience out there for you. And especially if this is a sniff test that I have, and this is more on like the maker side, obviously. If I tell somebody in conversation what I'm working on and they keep asking me questions and they're really interested, then I know that my instinct is good and somebody will want to see it. That was a situation with Sanctuary City Hotline, and I was surprised at how quickly somebody wanted to pick it up. Even though, you know, so yeah, trust your gut and story, story, story.
Watch your length. You're going to have a harder time getting a 40-minute film out there than you will getting a 15 or 20-minute film out there, historically across the board with festivals, distributors, what have you. So watch your length.
Well, it's hard to sum it up in one line, but I think, you know, coming from a place of digital distribution, and the internet is a loud and crowded place, so to the extent that you can be distinctive, think about how you're going to stand out from the pack. Whether, you know, I think of, you know, Rafaela being affiliated with Doc NYC. You know, I think about Joe's violin and why that stood out for the pack. For me, it was because every time I watched it, I was weeping, and it wasn't loud in a conventional way. It was a subtle film about a relationship between a 90-something-year-old and a teen middle school kid. And it wasn't loud like, you know, grab you by the lapels like a Casey Neistat video, but it was impactful and it was distinctive in terms of the emotional buttons that it was pushing, pretty unapologetically. Or, you know, I love your fucking name. It's, you know, it's direct address to the camera, that sort of Errol Morris and Terratron style. I mean, so I choose those two examples because there's a canyon between them in terms of style of storytelling, but I would credit them both with standing up from the pack in terms of being very distinctive and memorable. So I think you want to be loud, but be loud in your own way.
Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have today, but thank you so much to the panel for coming out, and thank you to all of you for being here. Thanks.
Thank you, Sam.